Hi, this video is about how the mind works only one way from the inside. It's an extract from another video we've done called A Summary Introduction of How the Human Mind Works. And whether you're seeing this for the first or the second or the third time, it's always valuable to integrate this information as deeply as you can. So, enjoy. Hi, I'm Ken Manning. I'm with Insight Principles. And this video is about the fact that your mind works only one way, from the inside out. Most people operate with a misconception about how the mind works. It's very valuable to really understand how it works. It's also very valuable to understand how it doesn't work, and we're going to cover both of those. Let me start with a metaphor. So this morning I went for a walk, a beautiful morning, and the sun came up. While I was walking, I was watching the sun come up. But in reality, did the sun really come up? So if you know something about science and how the universe works, you know that the sun is actually stationary and the earth is actually rotating, and we're actually going down, going around with the rotation of the earth. The sun is actually still, it's not moving at all, or very little compared to us. But it appears that the sun is coming up, and we think about it that way. So it really looks to us like the sun is coming up. The reality is something else. So the way things actually work is not always the way they appear. And when it comes to the mind, that's really the case. If you ask an ordinary person where their feelings and experiences come from, chances are they would tell you from their circumstances, from the events of their life, from other people, from whether their hopes and dreams and preferences are being met or not. Yet, often people will look at their own experiences and they'll realize they were caught up in their thinking or their way of looking at something with their thoughts was creating their experience of life. And people who have some knowledge of their mind tend to go back and forth between these two perspectives. It's like there are these two paradigms. Paradigm is the way that you understand things. So one paradigm is that we live in a world that's outside in. It does things, it is a certain way, things happen in life, and those affect us. We think about them after they happen, and then we experience our feelings and our experience of life from the events and the things going on around us. That's one paradigm. The other paradigm is that our thinking is creating what we perceive, what we feel, what we are having happen inside of us, and how the world looks to us on the outside. It's all being created in thought. That is the inside out paradigm. Well, it turns out there are not actually two paradigms. There's actually only one. Only one of them is actually true. And the other one is a misunderstanding. And whether you realize it or not, that you're living in a world of thought, there's only one way your mind works, which is from the inside. The human mind is a creative process. There's a creative set of principles that's creating the way that we know life, the way that we experience life, and what our inner world is like. Our feelings and our meaning and our sense of things is actually all created inside through the power of our creative process. Now, our creative process has a number of principles operating in it. And when I say principles, these are scientific principles. They're like forces of nature. An example of a force of nature would be gravity. You know, the pen falls. Well, what makes the pen fall? Well, there's a force of nature that we call gravity. We actually don't know or have ever seen gravity. It's an invisible force, but we know what it does. We know that it pervades everything in life. And this principle, gravity, pervades everything in the universe. Well, there are principles operating in the human mind that permeate every particle of our being, and every experience and every thought that we have is a set of principles. I'm going to draw you a picture which illustrates these principles. So if this is your average person, I know it doesn't look like your average person, but I'm not the best artist, so be it. So anyway, but if you imagine that the human mind is like an old-time movie projector, okay? Imagine that this mind is like an old-time movie projector. And we have something that, we have awareness, we have a field of awareness, which is produced by consciousness as a force, like gravity, of consciousness that gives us awareness of life. And everything we experience happens in this field of awareness. It's a constant. And if consciousness is like light, in the metaphor of a movie projector, thought flows through our consciousness, and the consciousness lights up the thought and makes it seem real to us. So at every moment, we have different thoughts coming through our mind, and consciousness enlightens that thinking. So we have a principle, which is consciousness. We have a principle, which is thought, which is the power to create. We have ideas, we have imagination, we have memory, we have insight, we have all kinds of thought that is the power to create experience. And at each moment, thought is happening and joining with consciousness, creating the experience that we have. And there's a third principle, and the third principle is what we call mind, or the life, intelligent life force that makes life possible, that makes consciousness possible, that makes the power to think possible. So if you imagine from a formless, invisible source, there's coming from off the page, I'll draw a little arrow, just, to indicate there's something invisible behind life, this invisible, intelligent life force that brings us consciousness and the power to create with our thoughts. We're experiencing whatever thought is happening in our consciousness. Now, there is a world, a physical world that we live in. There's a physical body that we live in. And the physical body takes in sensory data from the world, but it's all shaped, created, and experienced in our consciousness. So for example, you can see me or hear me on this video, and it looks like I'm on your laptop, but in reality, I'm happening in your consciousness. And your thoughts are shaping your experience, creating your experience of this moment. So, this process is completely invisible to us. I'll give you an example. So, let's say I have this granddaughter, Gracie, and she loves science. So now I'm giving you a thought. Okay, let's say that square represents Gracie. And Gracie loves science, and she invited me up to her house to show me this cell phone charger that she had created out of a pile of magnets. It was the cutest little thing. She's so sweet, and I just love her. And I put my cell phone on it, and God bless, the cell phone still worked. And she was so convinced that she had created a cell phone charger. Now, what just happened? If you got a sense of Gracie, it became kind of three-dimensional for you. In your mind, there's a real person named Gracie, who's Ken's granddaughter. And your mind, invisibly, adds a realness factor. It's like you don't question as you're experiencing this idea or this story, whether it's real or not. It just makes it real. This is what the mind does. It takes whatever you're thinking and makes it look real to you. So the movie production studio of your mind is on the inside. It's in your awareness. It's invisible, but it's in your awareness, creating your experience of Gracie. Now, if you have any of the feeling that I have for Gracie, they'll have some joy and some delight. And that feeling will infuse that thinking. And because we live in a physical being that's rather sensitive, a body, that vibration of thought transfers into our body, and we feel the joy or the happiness that you have in your thoughts. Or if you have somebody, Gracie, in your life you don't like, maybe that came to your mind and then you have a different feeling. But in summary, there's a process, an invisible process of the innate intelligence of life, the intelligent life force in us, giving us consciousness, giving us the power to think and form ideas, and catalyzing that process into the reality that we see. And it's happening inside us. And we look out at life through that process. We look at all of our sensory data and all of our sense of the outside world through that process. That's why we say we're experiencing life from the inside out. Okay. Now this process is completely invisible, but if you look, there is a physical world and there is a physical body, but the physical world and the body do not create what we perceive, and they do not create how we feel. This process inside us does that. That's what we mean by we experience life from the inside out. Now, if you don't know that this is how it works, you tend to look at your body as though it was a camera, operate just like a camera, taking the world in completely objectively, the way that the world is. And most of the time when we don't think about it or we don't realize that there's a process going on the inside, we actually treat the world and life as though we're reading it completely objectively like a camera. Except it doesn't work that way. Thought and consciousness and this intelligent life force are creating your experience of life in your mind. Now, if and when you realize this, and most everybody has seen this, for at least in moments, and a moment would look like you're going along, you're having some thoughts, and then you notice that you're thinking, and then the thinking clears. Because instead of you being caught up in a reality of something, you saw that you were thinking it, you stepped back, you saw the thinking dissipated. And then the intelligent logic of your life force moves your awareness in a particular way. And that particular way is very logical. So when your head clears, you become present in the present moment. You actually are seeing life with much more clarity. Now, if you live with this knowledge over a longer period of time, more consciously, it has enormous value, and we've seen this with countless people who have learned this. It's very empowering because you start to live in the realization that the power is inside you for your life. The world does not own you. People do not own you. Situations do not own you. You have the power to have intelligent response to whatever's going on, to suit your needs and your purposes and the people that you care about and the situations that you're responsible for. It's enormously freeing because all you can realize that there's nothing outside of you that owns you. You own your own mind. You think for yourself. Okay. And the more you know this and experience this, you just learn to take life as it comes. You relax more. You have more trust and faith that the intelligence and wisdom is always in you to respond to whatever might happen. So instead of worrying about things or over planning things, you're thoughtful about what you need to be aware of and what you need to make happen. But then you can live a lot more in the flow of life with knowing that insight and wisdom is always available to you. It's very hopeful and it's very positive. It leaves you space to be more happy and joyous for no good reason. And then when life is challenging, it gives you a great deal of resilience. Because instead of getting caught up in a lot of reactions, you still react, you still have your habits and your background and your culture way of seeing things that cause you to react certain ways. But then you know that it's your thinking and you can step back and relax. I'll give you an example. So someone who doesn't understand this at all, who has kids. So they tell their kids to behave a certain way, and then the kids don't. Well, what happens? You get angry and frustrated. And you're convinced that you're angry and frustrated because your kids are misbehaving. And you're justified in, treating them a certain way in order to get them to toe the line. This is how most people ordinarily live. They have no awareness that their thinking is where their anger is coming from and their frustration is coming from. Nor do they know that the way that they're seeing the situation with their kids is coming from their thinking as well. Second scenario. Many people know that their thinking has something to do with their experience. So in this scenario, kids are misbehaving. And the person starts to get angry or frustrated. And then they start to think to themselves, well, I come to the realization that being really angry at the kids isn't going to help. They don't learn anything. It just makes a mess. And then there's all this cleanup afterwards. So let me calm down, stop being angry, get into a positive mental attitude, and try and be reasonable with the kids. And then you go and you try and control yourself and you do your best and you have an interaction with the kids. But in the background, you're actually really frustrated and annoyed. Now, a lot of people have this sense that, our thinking is responsible for our feelings to some degree, but it's really after the fact. The kids pissed me off. I know better, so I need to control my thinking. And people who think this way have added to their life a second job. The second job is managing their mind, which is a whole career on top of what you already have to do. Everyone has a life to manage. Now people have two lives to manage, the mind and the life. Well, this is the second scenario. Now the third scenario is, that you're living in a world of your own thinking. And in this scenario, you have kids and they won't do what you ask them to do. Often. If you had kids like mine, so be it. Now, the kids are misbehaving and you start to get frustrated. But if you have a grounding in this and it's in your habit to remember that you are living from the inside out and that the kids don't have the power to piss you off, you'll notice you're getting frustrated, but then the understanding kicks in and it helps you realize this is thinking happening. This is a mental process happening. And the kids aren't making me angry. This is just my habit. And what will happen is, if you hold on to that realization or it stays with you, the thinking begins to dissipate. The anger begins to dissipate. The frustration dissipates. And now the logic, the intelligent logic of the mind kicks in. You become more present. You get some perspective. Maybe the perspective is, the kids have been cooped up in the house for the last 5 weeks because of the quarantine, and they're going nuts. I've got to do something to distract them before they get out of hand. And now you have wisdom and insight helping you out, which feels good. You see options. And then you start seeing the situation differently. You know, these kids are really cute. I love them to death. You know, they're only 5 and 7, and God bless, I was worse than them when I was 5 and 7. Let's make the best of this. Let's go play a game. Now, what I just suggested is not a technique. It's the logical product of the right understanding of how the mind works. The mind works only one way, from the inside out. And when you realize that, the intelligent life force in you will give you the perspective and the intelligence you need to make something productive and positive with whatever situation that you're in. In summary, it's not what you think that matters. It's not how you manage your mind that matters. It's that you realize that you're living in a world of thought and consciousness that's catalyzing your experience of life into the reality that you see from the inside out. It looks outside in often, but the world misunderstands this, and so many people will talk to each other or to you that that's how it works. The stock market went up, everybody's happy. The coronavirus is here, we have to stay home. Oh no, lots of fear and anxiety. What are we going to do about it? The invisible power of the creative process is invisible to those people, which is most people. So we're surrounded by that outside in misunderstanding. So I get caught up in it too. Like my first decades were all crafted, my life in that outside in misunderstanding. But now that I know it works from the inside out, I have a much more balanced life, a much happier life, and a much more productive life. So that's what's in store for you. This power is invisible, it's fast, it's immediate, and it's creating your life from the inside out. So thanks for listening. I hope this was helpful. All the best. Bye.